Song of Solomon, or the Song of Songs, is one of the great love paeans of all literature. But it is unlike any other book in the Bible. It's not prophet, it's not one of the wisdom books, it's not history. And in fact, even the way language is used in the Song of Solomon is unique, like nothing else in the Bible. It's simple, it's naive even, and that's because it is a collection of folk songs that have been arranged together to tell a story. And the Song of Solomon is very ancient. It goes back, we think, almost 3,000 years. So why, 200 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, did the church decide to include the Song of Solomon in the Christian Bible? Well, the Song of Solomon is not just a love poem. It can be seen as an allegory for God's relationship with his people. The voice of my beloved. Look, he comes leaping upon the mountains, bounding over the hills. God is our lover. God is the one who desires to love us. And he approaches us. He comes to us eagerly. He calls to us. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away, for now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. God speaks to us and asks us to leave the cares of the world, to set aside the winters of our discontented lives, and to walk with him into a new creation, a time of light and growth. This new life, this springtime life of beauty that he offers us. But not everyone is able to hear that voice. Or hearing it, but being unbelieving, they may turn away. Jesus says of the life offered by God, that God has hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent and have revealed them to infants. What I think he means here is that those who are wise in the ways of the world, those who are intelligent in terms of making the world work to their advantage, in short, all those who are committed to and involved in the world, these are the people who can be so distracted that they cannot hear the voice of God. Or perhaps they are accustomed to doing things their way, and it never occurs to them that there is another way of doing things, God's way, a way of the Spirit that is apart from the world, yet active in the world. Or perhaps the rich and the powerful. They can't imagine that there is another spiritual power that is beyond and above theirs, so far beyond and above them that they are like a mote of dust in comparison. These are the people for whom the things of God are hidden, not because God doesn't want to give them his gifts, but because they don't recognize the gifts of the Spirit as real. And they assume that the gifts that God has given them, the very gifts that make them able to get along in the world, to get ahead, to accumulate, do all those things, they think those gifts are of their own making and doing and have nothing to do with God. Have you ever been so involved in work or in some other activity that that you didn't recognize God's gifts? Have you ever been so involved, so active, that it slipped right by you, and then years later, perhaps, you recognize it for what it was? Have you ever put on the mask of the wise and the intelligent, and discovered later that you had not recognized God's gift? But the wise and the intelligent are those that Jesus compares to fractious and quarreling children in the marketplace. They are thoroughly caught up in the corrupting influences of the world. So it is to infants, little children, to whom God has given these gifts. And I hope that that is most of us, that we are those little children, at least most of the time. You see, the wise and the intelligent, they thought John the Baptist was possessed because he was in the city. But a little child, in all innocence, might walk up to John and ask him, "Mister, what are you doing?" And John might have given that child an answer that would have transformed their life. Right now I'm thinking of my grandson Eli. He had his 7th birthday day before yesterday. Now when he was 4, he was with us on a camping trip. And where we were was at the shore. And on one occasion we walked out to where the beach had been, but the tide didn't come in. Eli looked at this, having had no experience with this before, and he saw 2 women down on the beach a ways, and so he called out to them. He said, "Hey, ladies, what happened to the water?" Now see, he had no need to be anything but the innocent child in that moment. But the wise and the intelligent are no longer innocent. They saw Jesus eating and drinking with common people, and most especially with those they didn't like, tax collectors. And all they could see was reality the way they defined it. Jesus was just a carouser and a charlatan. They could not have imagined that of all the gifts that God has given us, Jesus was the greatest gift. And Jesus had been given first to the poor and the unseemly, not to the wise and intelligent. It was the poor and the needy who were aware that they were sinful. They knew their sin. They knew they needed redemption. They wore no masks to hide who they were. These were the people who, out of their need, were ready to experience the love of God, to accept the gifts they were given. These were the people whom life had burdened, perhaps beyond their ability to bear. And Jesus said to them, as he says to us today, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Rest for your souls. How that phrase must have resonated in the hearts of those people. But to the worldly wise, who needs rest? I've got lots of things to do. I've got to do, and I've got places to go. Who needs rest? It's as though their burden is their life, and perhaps they have made it so. They have made the burdens of the world their life. But I think that all of us know at some level, at some time, that there is something else. Something that I am missing. Something that is wrong with my life. I think that's true of all but the most pathological among us. So Paul in Romans addresses this human condition. He says, I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. And again he says, I see in my members another law at war with the law of my mind, making me captive to the law of sin. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt really conflicted about one thing or another? Because that is the war that's constantly going on in our minds. The desire to do the right thing and the fear of the consequences if we actually do it. Or perhaps it's just the inability to see what the right thing is. Now, for many years, centuries I suppose, biblical scholars have debated whether Paul was speaking when he spoke of this inner strife of his, whether he was speaking of his past before his conversion, or was this reflecting the state of his mind after his conversion when he actually wrote those words. And there are those scholars who say he was writing about his past because a real Christian, especially Paul, couldn't be so conflicted. And I submit to you that those scholars were not leading closely examined lives, because we are all embroiled in such conflicts. It is the human condition. It is the nature of sin. Who among us cannot say with Paul, I find it to be a law that when I want to do what is good, evil lies close at hand. None of us like to think of ourselves as sinners. We don't like that word. But we are a wayward people. And we need to examine ourselves as Paul did. The greatest of all apostles, Paul, has this tortured self-examination. Well, it's the same kind of thing you and I have to do. And if we don't acknowledge the truth of our sin, then we are like the wise and intelligent people that Jesus describes as errant and misbehaving children. But by acknowledging this, our common humanity, by truly accepting our sin, we regain a portion of that innocence we had as little children. And then we can ask God, hey God, who's going to rescue me? And then we might be able to say, thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord.